Okay, it says recording now. And it says it's being recorded. Okay, we're
This
good.
has been recording for, oh no, we've been on for 44 minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
now it's recording. I have a red dot. I promise.
Welcome everybody to another episode of MSP 1337. It is that time of the month where it is Fireside Chat with Cyber Matt Lee of Pax8. Matt, welcome to the show.
Man, I appreciate it. This has been a fun run. We're at number, I think, 16, yeah?
Application software security, and yes, we are
What?
actually recording.
But you know what? It's good because we've only done this once before and we did our best to recreate it. But at this point, I'm going to cut you off, Chris, in the script and say, no, I tease. Hey, man, but MSPs they don't use application software. They don't develop any applications. So why would we care, Chris?
No, and I think to add to that, I don't know how many times I've actually heard MSPs talk about things like we've been working on standing up a side of our company that builds applications, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, and we've built our own portal, and we
Yeah.
host our own ITSM, and we do all those things. And yet, for the majority, MSPs say they don't develop software. And even if you're not one of those, I want you to pay attention to this set of safeguards because you probably write your own scripts. Because you probably do copy scripts from Stack Exchange or wherever you're going to get them,
Right.
and just try them out and hope they work.
Just
Put a
Googled
back
it.
door somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
let's,
think
anyways.
I think in the other part of this too is, and we were talking about this earlier when I thought we were recording, is getting into things like when you launch cloud applications or web apps that are available to consume. It doesn't ask you whether or not you do them custom. It just says that as part of this control, you have a responsibility to maintain and patch and be cognizant of things like what third-party libraries might those products or services consume that you now have an obligation or responsibility for. That raises questions around how many things we could be doing, through open source paths and that kind of thing to do it.
Well,
But the reality is there's a whole lot of work involved when you go down that path.
Well, there's a perfect example we can use in this. For example, my good buddy Kelvin Techler that does the CIPP, right? You might host it yourself, but that means you're responsible for keeping it up to date. That's what they mean here, and I'll read the overview to you of application software security. Manage the security lifecycle of in-house developed. Got it. Okay, cool. That's where everybody stops reading. Cool. We don't develop software. Comma space, hosted. Wait a minute. Hosted, comma space, or acquired software to prevent, comma space, detect, comma space, and remediate security weaknesses before they can impact the enterprise. They said prevent, which means isolation, methodologies that allow you to protect it and microsegment it as necessary, things to that nature. Detect, that means monitoring and finding stuff like it seems logical.
Well, and only the
remediate
first
security
one
weaknesses.
is in-house developed, right? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't say hosted developed or acquired that you
Sure,
customize.
those are separate entities, right?
Very
And you
much
could-
so.
Yeah, so that's the way I want people to think about this set of safeguards as we go into it. 16.1, Chris, is a process-oriented safeguard. It's one of those ones moving to govern as we see that play out in 8.1, which we'll talk about at some point. Yep,
Sure.
as officially as this episode, 8.1 lives. It is now public. It is available. You can download it. You can see that they're shifting towards governance. Okay, and it says establish and maintain. That's the one that's how you can always tell, right? Establish and maintain is going to end up being process or oriented. A secure application development process. You're like, okay, I'm checking out right now. I don't make applications. In this process, address such items as secure application design standards. That means like before you make an actual application or a script, ensure that it's designed properly. Jason Slagle did like a great job talking about some of those problems with like AI developed ones. Secure coding practices, right? Like actually know where your code is, how it's made, how it's checked in, checked out. I'm looking at you, every vendor that's been pwned by a supply chain attack. Developer training. Make sure your people know what the hell they're doing. That's the whole premise of Jason's talk last I saw it. All right, vulnerability management. Wait, Chris. Wait. Why is vulnerability management called out? I thought Control 7 handled that. What's the difference here?
Well, I mean, we're talking about with regards to software that you are building and or software where the libraries are being pulled in from somewhere else.
You're saying to me that if I'm building a piece of software, I'm responsible somehow to ensure that it has vulnerability management of the crap I create and the vulnerabilities I make. It puts me on the other side of the fence as if like I'm that mysterious vendor persona that we talk about that has to manage vulnerabilities, not me. This is blowing my mind right now, Chris. I don't
It
understand.
is a mind blower. And I also think we got to remember Control 6, because if you're building custom software, what kind of user privileges and permissions are
Sure.
you baking
Oh,
into this?
and you're singing to my heart right now, Chris. I'm glad we're far apart, not close together right now. This is just too much. It's too much.
Too much.
Yeah.
Dare
Okay.
to tango?
Continuing. Vulnerability management, security of third-party code, like actually giving a shit about the security of the stuff you ingest, which means you have to understand it. You have to look at it. You have to be responsible for keeping an eye on it, right? I think there's been several great examples of when you go get something from GitHub, make sure there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people using it and tons of people forking it and tons of pull requests and tons of response. Like, do that. Make sure that
Not
it's
the ones that
actually
have
usable.
2 files and hasn't been updated in 4 years.
2 files, nobody's touched it. Matt Lee wrote it, and it might have some bad stuff in it. You don't know.
But I think
Right?
this is
Yeah.
an area where I think, forget for a minute with regards to whether or not you may or may not develop software or applications. But
Sure.
this is an area where we know that the majority, I shouldn't say the majority, a lot of vendors whose products we consume are using these libraries, are
Well, and
using these services. And I think we have more than just the I trust you, my vendor, to take care of
take
these
it,
things.
yeah, take it where you're going with this, or a little bit further, which is take 16 and what you garner from it and use it to ask your vendors if they're doing these things.
There
I
we
think
go.
that's exactly where you're going with this.
That was
CJ,
where I was
and
going.
That's where I'm at. So, all right, continuing. Application security testing procedures. We're going to get into that. Well, but I thought pen testing is, yep. But if you're developing code, you now need that to be pen tested. Wait a minute, Matt. Are you telling me there's 2 types of pen testing? Like there might be a focus that is very specifically on pen testing my environment, my users, my humans, my software I consume and buy as an organization, and the stuff I make. Just nuts
Yeah.
here.
And
Nuts.
then you
We'll
get
to that in
into the
18,
types of
but
that. What is it like the types you might do authenticated
yeah.
or privileged access pen test to see can I elevate privileges based on the credentials I've been given to do this penetration test?
All right, 16.2. Now that we've got a process we're building, what we'll find is that all of the rest of 16 modifies 16.1. If you're looking at my visualizations, you'll see that's a solid line. That means a parameter being given to 16.1. So 16.2, while it's also a process-oriented safeguard, and I think, in fact, most of 16 is,
Yes.
establish and maintain a process to accept and address reports of software vulnerabilities. Like there was a time, Chris, and it wasn't so long ago. I feel like an old man. I don't know if this is how it creeps up on you or if it's the gray beard, but I feel older. But there was a time in the last decade that software companies that we know and love were actively suing people to shut them up when they found a vulnerability.
Yep.
I just want to let that bake in. And it wasn't that simple in one of the cases you might be thinking of, but basically the same theory applies. Most people don't have a vulnerability management process. We didn't have a very authoritative vulnerability process until just recently. ConnectWise, same thing. They just set up a vulnerability management process that's much more official. So you start seeing this world.
You could go
Yeah,
back further, Matt. Go back further in time. Remember when everybody was watching when browsers would release another version of their application? So you go from 5 to 5.3, and you're like, hey, we're not deploying this to everybody. We're
Yeah.
going to put this in the lab, and let's go make sure that everything that we use still works in 5.3.
And that goes back to regression testing, some normalization over time that we've dealt with. Like
And we
HTML5
didn't assume
did a
the
huge amount
vendor,
for that, right?
we did not assume the vendor was responsible for verifying all of the flaws found. We took it upon ourselves to say we have a responsibility and an obligation to our own staff and our own clients to make sure that we've checked the integrity of the apps and services we're going to use.
Yeah.
We don't do that
Well,
anymore.
And even then, like we've never been great at doing any of that.
No.
And we'll get into some of this about that testing piece I talked about earlier. Continuing on in this safeguard, right, about this addressing vulnerabilities. So now we need to accept and address vulnerabilities. And it says you need to provide a mean for external entities to report. That's where that falls apart, right? A lot of people didn't. They didn't have a trust center or some place to actually report this, or they didn't participate in something like a bug bounty program.
Right.
With some of those.
That was more than 10 years ago before that started, but it wasn't much longer than that.
I know, and even then, it's still something people keep as, look at these idiot bug bounters who just want to make a profit off of us. And you have problems, and you're not paying people clearly enough to fix it themselves, and therefore we're an externalized force. All right, get off my damn pulpit. I'm not going to preach from there. Okay, I'm good. But the point is that use a vulnerability tracking system that includes severity ratings and metrics for measuring timing from identification, analysis, and remediation. Like if I have code and it's found to have some deserialization or remote code execution flaw or right, just all the horrible things that can happen, IDOR bypass, whatever it might be, all the different things. If those things are there, we need to know when they were reported and how quickly we fix them, which is a sign of how healthy your application development process is around security. Because Chris, here's where it gets weird, and I'm going to get on my pulpit a little bit. The problem isn't that they don't know about the vulnerabilities. What? The problem is that they cannot thread them in over that next MSP that is needed for that next quarter sales growth to say, I'm not joining this platform until you have this feature. All right, feature X, feature X, feature X goes in front of everything, every sprint from now forward, feature X, feature X. What about that big security bug? Hide it, don't worry about it, we'll deal with it. We got to have it. And I'm not saying people are that callous, but I will say that the forces of capitalism that have the continued driving growth that we all love are the same forces that without regulatory or other check and balances allow for this to exist in applications. This is the problem we live with because we do not have that regulatory oversight. You and I have had that conversation, but yeah.
I mean, this isn't new, right? This has been from the beginning.
This is endemic from the very beginning.
Very beginning.
Yeah, this is garden of Eden.
And to some respect, it is understandable because you're building something to make money at, and I think that's that balancing act of recognizing the risk. And I think one of the things that, to your point, that we're not seeing a lot of is I think vendors in the early stages don't often spend enough time understanding what the potential impact to the organization would be if the vulnerability was exploited because they're so worried about getting that next iterative release out.
And simply put, their people that invest in these companies have not been forced to or have not been bit hard enough to change their expectations of startups.
Nor do they even ask those questions, right? Like when angel investors give money to a startup, it's because of what it has the potential to do, not what it has the potential to break.
Right. Oh, 100%. Now let's look at you over there, recall. Anyways, I digress. All right. Okay.
16.3.
So 16.2 says have a way to accept vulnerabilities. 16.3, like
perform root cause analysis.
This is humans defined, Chris. This is the actual finish of my just exposition of my earlier point, which is if we have to make a control that says perform root cause analysis, it means that people aren't doing it. When reviewing vulnerabilities, root cause analysis is the task. They're even having to educate in this control to tell people what the hell it is. It is the task of evaluating underlying issues that create vulnerabilities in code. It's not fixing the vulnerability, it's fixing the root cause of that vulnerability. It's back up a few stages, right?
I think if we put that into context, it says to move past it, right? Like that this isn't band-aids. This isn't like we've addressed the symptom, we've suppressed it. Like it's we genuinely have a path forward where this is no longer going to come up again.
It's like the old imagery of the like big giant warning banner coming out of the machine and then going into the shredder, right? From the paper form. We fixed the problem. It's solved.
Which is the best one is like, you don't have to worry about it if you just take the paper out of the fax machine. You'll never get a fax.
Homer Simpson covering up the blinking light on his dash, right? Like, that's the perfect meme image for this, right? He's like, done. I digress. Okay, so it says you need to review vulnerabilities and provide root cause analysis. And the essential point is to move beyond fixing just an individual vulnerability and moving to like actually fixing the cause. And let's unpack that. What could that be? Let's say you have something that lends itself 2 stages down in the code to causing problems. You fix it by putting something to stop this here, but you could redesign this element to not have that flaw. And instead, that's the difference in those two, right? Work to go redesign an element, which might be thousands and thousands and thousands of lines long, and a new redesign methodology. I will say this is probably where machine learning and AI help the most for coders.
Absolutely.
I would wager, as time goes. Is this
because they can take thousands and thousands of lines of code and find where the actual problem exists.
I mean, just the redesign capability of that. Redesign this so that this flaw can't exist is something I see in the very near future, maybe in the next year.
If it's not here now.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And you already see it with like GitHub's, GitGuardian and other players that are trying to analyze that. But I really mean just like taking a developer in their IDE and saying, help me redesign this and test it in its regression testing, like that kind of state capability, especially
I just listened to a podcast episode of Pivot. Is it Kara Swisher? I think that's she wrote the book Tech Burn. It's
Nice.
Anyways, she interviewed the CISO for ChatGPT, and that was one of the things that they talked about. Like it's not about how we can replace coders to write better code. It's how tools that
How
are
do we fix
built.
brownfield horse
Yeah.
crap that exists
Yes.
and get people over water without spending another head count when I can
Yeah.
buy something for $300 a year per user or something?
And this is something that's not just in the programming space. They were talking largely about like, garbage in, garbage out. Like where do you scrape data from? How do you use
Yeah,
data? How do you
sure.
know it's good data? And it was talking about like the whole like, fake news and some of the things like how you can emotionally convince somebody to do something
Sure.
because it aligns with the ideology. What was really interesting about that is like the point was this has been happening for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? The beauty of what is happening with AI and what we can do in the large language models and the ability to rewrite code is you now have what is happening is oversight that says we no longer want to accept that. We want this to be better. Vendors are building products. They don't want them to break. They don't want to spend money developing new programs that are like, I sure hope there's a big vulnerability so I can be in the news again.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think we are in that day today where that will change. Not to get too theoretical, y'all, sorry, getting off of the topic of the CIS controls. Okay, so perform root cause analysis. Moving on, establish and manage an inventory of third-party software components. I won't beleaguer this point with all the components, but basically it's the beginning of SBOM. They even quoted in here, bill of materials, software bill of materials, SBOM. Also basically slated for future use, things I might use, which is kind of interesting that they would call that out. But any risk to third-party component could pose. Like you're basically starting to say, hey, this third-party piece I'm using for financial management, and I'll give you this as a perfect example. One major player that I used as an MSP had a flaw where I kept failing authentications for a Chrome binary that was basically 2,000 vulnerabilities on it and 100 versions old. And I said, nobody in my employ is using that. I would lose my mind. As it turned out, it was baked into the thick client. And it was the sole component for signing into QuickBooks. And it was because that package was old and they hadn't paid for a new package. And even if they had, it would still be old. It was like 71 versus 67. So the point is that when we start talking, we're like Chrome 190 or 200 something. Right. The point was, and that tells you when it was too. But the point was, that was a third-party component that when you're assessing the risk, now is handling the financials. I would assess it higher. Okay. The point is, have a list of your third-party components. We have a lot to get through on this one, so I'm going to run us along.
Yeah, we can move a little faster. Some of these are getting a little bit nerdy anyway.
The next one is use up-to-date and trusted third-party components. First it says have a list. The next one says make sure it's up-to-date and trusted. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like, go look at the GitHub. How many people are using it? Is it up-to-date? Are they doing updates? Is it 12
I think
years
this
old?
is a specific one that is as if you were doing third-party vendor evaluation as an MSP, right? Like this is one that you can do some checking on your own.
Yeah, you can go to built with, at least for SaaS applications for the most part. You can get into certain things that help you understand that. But really, it's just a good thing to understand when asking these questions. Tell me about your application security process. I know you can't share everything, but do you do these types of things? Are you meeting these types of components? Like, that's a very great question I would ask, right?
Walk me through your API. So you're saying it's TLS version 1? Is that what you said?
Okay, we're done here. I'm going to see myself out.
Yeah,
all right,
but I think that's still happening, and I think that there's a lot in this space that doesn't necessarily understand the nature of that when you look at it through the lens of what does that expose us to because of what version of an API might be getting used when there's newer versions available and have been for a long time.
Well, that doesn't even get us back into the sunsetting of legacy access methodologies, which isn't really ascribed for in here.
Like we didn't turn off the old API. It's still on as long as you're
don't get me started, Chris. You're trying to pull my chain. We're only 16.6. We have like 10 more.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, establish and maintain. So we're back in process land again. Severity rating system. Right now, if you're building it and you're getting these reports of vulnerability, all they're saying is, like, find a way to like rate them. If you have a pure 10, maybe the 10 guy gets dealt with first. If you've got a 3, maybe she sits for a minute, right? Like you might leave that alone or hard to execute.
Maybe it's more of a feature that you just didn't know you had.
And even this comes up with like regression, for example, right? When we're talking about regression, I think regression, the SSH vulnerability that's out there right now that requires patching, I think it takes 10,000 simultaneous connections just to overwhelm a 32-bit system. They don't have any theoretical exploitation of it in a 64-bit system, which would be orders of magnitude more than that and not easy to achieve. So when do you do that? Well, that 10 might be a 3 or that 9 might be a 3, right? Like it comes down to some of that. So, but the point is, as you're doing this in your own application, you need to have a severity rating system and a way to set a minimum level of security acceptability for releasing code. They kind of packed that in here. and facilitates prioritization of what's discovered when it's discovered and what's fixed first.
One can always find bugs, right? Like, let's be
Yeah.
honest. There's always going to be a bug trail.
How exploitable is that bug? What is it worth? What can I do
Yeah.
with it? Those are the things that matter. And you need to be able to investigate that or pay for third-party SaaS DAST capabilities, right?
All
Okay.
right. 16.7.
16.7. Use, holy God, it's a blue triangle in my visual because it's a tool, essentially, which they're saying. Use standard, industry recommended, hardening configuration templates for application infrastructure components. Now, I will call out that this is very, very complementary to the creators of these controls, right? In the sense
Sure.
that CIS sells hardened images. Those hardened images are like 2 cents more per compute hour on AWS and Amazon. So there might be some reason this is called out. That aside, I don't disagree with their statement. What they're saying is, get shit to a baseline configuration. Like, make sure when you roll it out, use something like Terraform or Kubernetes and kube clusters to check to see if the code meets what it was actually designed to be doing. Things that, and granted, anybody that's a developer, make fun of Matt, the security guy here, because I'm not massively a developer. I'm just a baby at understanding these concepts. So just make fun of me away.
There's something to add to this, though, that I think is important here, too. You talked about the configuration, and I think that's where this gets almost over the top. You think about the platforms that are out there that you can use, Google Cloud and some of the others where you can go in and build your own application. Just because you can build the application doesn't mean you've done any of these things, right? Like, this is saying, like, where is this application being hosted? Where is the, have you put the parameters around it? You know, the web application firewalls, the fill in the blank.
And it's really saying not even that. Chris, this is the interesting part. It's saying don't do it yourself. Either get a template or an automated methodology. Like, that's what they're saying. And if you look at it, they say on underlying servers, on databases, on web servers, which is how those are delineable.
Essentially saying you're not going to save money just because you're building it yourself if you're not making sure these things are in place.
Right. Yeah. Because if you're doing this yourself, you have to do all these things as well, to your point.
Right.
Versus
so that raises questions like, I don't know how many times
I don't
I've
want
heard
to miss
someone
something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on just a sec. So it also calls out cloud containers, which means you need to have some terraforming or Kubernetes methodology, something to bring that out that way. PaaS, right, or infrastructure as code, right, IAC, if you will. PaaS, whoa, wait. And SaaS, wait. So what they're saying is, if I'm using an application I built in Amazon and I use some type of Amazon Cognito services, the way it's configured matters with a standard template. Right? So just what they're getting at is, if you're going to build something, everything it touches, everything it consumes, everything it's made of needs to have standardized templates and configurations. Holy crap, let that set in for a second.
This is why building custom software oftentimes is not the best path to take, especially when you're doing it to just save money.
Yeah. Oh, 100% preach it. All right, 16.8. Come on, y'all. Like, this has to be said. Can I just walk away now? Can I just quit?
Separate production and non-production systems. So Matt, I think this is an interesting one, because if you go back in time, it was very common to have dev and production development environments, because that's how we started out in the programming space. We knew that compiling something wrong could bring a server down. So you
just
did
for
not do that.
availability perspective, right?
Right.
So that's why I'm
overload.
just tripped up on having to have this conversation. What I think it means, though, is yes, we would have separated those environments, but they might have shared the same database. They might have shared the copy of the database.
I hope not.
In my mind, I think this goes further, if you really take this down in your own heart, into I need separate, clean data that's not going to be PII if it's leaked, that's not necessarily going to be in that doesn't have a clear path across. In fact, one of the MSPs that's part of the hackening, I was sharing with him the fact that I'd found his dev environment and it wasn't protected by Cloudflare, and that it was actually still behind their Comcast modem, and that they had made a mistake in showing me that, because that told me they were both probably there, right? And so the first thought was, oh, I think that's separated well. I hope it is. And that's the point. You shouldn't hope it is. If you're going to build something for sandboxing, keep it fucking separate of the thing you want to keep protected.
Well, and permissions, right? So your dev environment should not have the same permissions as what it would be to publish to your production environment.
100%. It's a CI/CD pipeline, right?
Absolutely.
It's constant integration, constant development. Oh gosh, I hope I didn't screw that up. CI/CD. See, this is where I get to tell I'm an idiot.
So as he's pulling that up in the
constant integration, constant continuous delivery, or continuous deployment. So it was I have to self-correct. Matt, you lose 1 Matt point from yourself. Okay. But the point is,
good thing you have an infinite supply.
I get to make them. It's like printing your own money. It's amazing. Okay, but the point is you need to have separate environments. And that means fully separate, y'all, all of it. So that way if it's compromised, it doesn't have a breach impact on the data that you are held fiduciarily responsible for. Use shit data, keep separate systems, have separate accounts, don't give them cross permissions, all of the things. Go take Bo Bullock's Breaching the Cloud course. You'll walk off and go, oh my God, I'm completely wrong in everything I do in my life. No, I tease. But it is fantastic at teaching you some of those separations in that development space. So, okay. 16.9. Ensure all software development personnel receive training. But what about 14 and the end of 14 specificity of role-specific training? This is a reinforcer, right? Because at the end of 14, you get to conduct role-specific training, and they even call out developers getting secure development practice. So why? Well, because 14.x comes before IG2 of 16.9, right? Or comes after 16.9 because it is an IG3. So the point is that this IG2 is the first time you will see that developers need their own training far before you see role-specific training.
And you know, this is one that I don't think it says it in here, but like this is where like learning to develop under OWASP guidelines or some sort of industry standard around how to develop or program with security as a core component of what you're building.
Yep. And I have misled the audience. It is actually before. So 14.9 comes right before this, so I apologize. You will have seen role development. But we will add extra to this saying, writing secure code, right? Jim Manico at Manico does that both in person and in a lab-based form. Fantastic. If you're a developer, you're out there looking for somebody, I would plug Manicode every time. Their specific development environment, like that means they need training in Python if you're writing in Python, or heaven forbid Ruby on Rails if you're writing in Ruby. Ruby on Rails, rather.
I haven't heard that in a while.
Oh, I know. I heard it the other day, and I was like, oh, God. Me and Jason Slagle had a fantastic talk about it. He educates me a lot on this stuff because I'm ignorant. Training can include general security principles. Great. Like, teach developers why it matters. Why does an IDOR matter, right? Which is an indirect or insecure direct object reference. And I'll just do the fun here since we're here. What is an IDOR? Alyssa Miller does this the best. She goes, imagine you're driving up to a really, really fancy club, and right in front of you, you see this swag Lamborghini. They park, they hand the keys to the valet, they get their ticket number 68, and they go on their merry way. And I drive up in my 76 Pinto, popping and firing as she sputters up, and I walk out in my nice suit, and I hand them the keys, and they begrudgingly hand me number 69. What if I went around the corner and after they drove that horrible piss bucket away, I just changed it to 68 and walked back? And they then took my nice tuxedo, handed me my keys to my Lamborghini, and I drove away. That's an insecure direct object reference. I've been able to modify something handed to me, represent it to the authority figure, and gain something I shouldn't have had access to. And that's just one of hundreds of those types of vulnerabilities that people need to be aware of. When
you see a lot of that with forged identities, right?
Sure. SSRF, like or client CSRF, client-side request forgery, like all kinds of different methods to do things, right? And so the argument is that training can include general security or application security standard practices, things that help prevent those types of things. Conduct training at least annually, and design in a way to promote security within the development team, meaning like gamification, other methodologies of measurement, and build a culture of security among the developers. Chris, this triggers you a little bit sometimes, but that's tactical or strategic there? It sounds very tactical.
I think it can be a little bit of both, because I think that you want this to be on two different levels, right? Like you want them to not just be begrudgingly doing training. You want them to be excited and wanting to participate, that they are going to, participate in this.
Yeah.
Like it's
got
to be more than that.
Not punishing, gaining trust, gaining camaraderie. Like all of those things are parts and elements of the outcome of a good culture. But I actually think it really is those things to make it easy for people to do the right thing, easy to make up for mistakes when failing. Those are all just basic tenets and principles there that need to exist.
If you never go through the training, you're never going to have the opportunity to embrace it, right? Like you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. 1610. Apply secure design principles and application architectures. Now they're getting back into this architectural discussion saying, like, when you're designing your software, at the very beginning, you need the concepts of least privilege. You need the concepts of mediation, like something that's mediating between the entities, right? Think about it this way. Imagine one of the challenges of a microservice architecture. Microservice architecture, API-centric applications, some of those microservices aren't aware of each other and what they do and their function contextually. They just understand it can be asked for this and given this. And so some of the challenges of that are saying that we need to make sure we validate that the options being put in by the user are being mediated against all of these different endpoints to ensure that they aren't violating those business logic challenges after authentication or pre-authentication in their own right.
Sure.
And so it says examples of this would be ensuring explicit error checking is performed, documented for all input, right? So that means we're actually performing against all input, including size, data type, acceptable ranges, like what character should I have in this, formats, like these are against that, injection methodologies that allow me, like SQLi or other methodologies, remote code execution. That's what these prevent.
Or even
against,
just,
right?
it can be even simpler than that. So like I remember when I did some low-level development, my job was to create form validation. So like when you put values into a field, right?
Yeah.
Put a value in, and what if that value, it says it can support, you just start typing, and
what
then
if
you
it's
overload
and
the
1
buffer.
equals 1 and you return okay, and I now know I have access to a SQL database, right?
Right.
Like that.
Like there's a lot of things that were along those lines of like, so one of the things that I was responsible for was making sure that anything that was plugged into those fields was validated before it actually could talk to the server.
That's exactly what a mediation is.
Yeah.
100%. You're mediating in that regard or filtering in that regard.
Force
and
the
it
check
also
before.
says, which is weird because you should also do things. They packed two things in here, which I like and I don't like, because they're really saying they almost made a control of its own self and then a safeguard underneath it. So here's what they did. They first talked about like secure design principles, concept of least privilege, that's one type. Enforcing mediation, that's another type. But then they go into like this understanding of saying minimize attack surface. Well, what does that mean? We just talked about that. That's methods you just talked about from mediation. Like, why are we deviating? Minimizing attack surface, such as like turning off unprotected ports and services. Wait, that's control 4. What are you talking about?
Right, but again,
the same way, removing unnecessary programs and
I don't
files.
necessarily agree with that, because I think that a lot of development today is being done in an environment that has already been prepackaged to give you a space to do it. And I think this is a great place for it to say, but wait a second, you still need to go make sure that the things that are not going to be used are not available to be exploited.
That's correct. Inside another package, inside another set of files, inside another thing. I understand that concept. I'm just simply saying there are thematic elements that got brought into their own world of 16 that already coexisted outside, and it's because the human nature is not to do it if it's not explicitly called out.
I'll give you an example. WordPress. You can host multiple websites in a single WordPress instance, right? And they all have their own different users, their own different plugins, their own different. Well, one of the things that can happen with that is, what if you didn't update the plugins in all of the websites to the latest version?
Yeah, there might be an executable that you can use.
And now it can crosswalk to the other sites.
It's analogous, but not direct. But I see what you're saying there. Yeah.
You just don't know, right?
But it goes into even talking about removing unnecessary default accounts, renaming. Like it, to your point, it's very valid, especially in that example which you just gave.
Turn on a WordPress site. It comes with a default account. It's called admin.
Yep. All right. So 1611, moving on. Leveraged vetted modules or service applications for application security components. What they're saying is like, don't go make your own stupid authentication platform. Go pay Auth0, right? Like, or use one that's already out there. Don't reinvent your own. Use OIDC. Right? Like, I made up my own authentication protocol and use my own standard.
I'm going to write my policies from scratch.
Yeah. And this is weird when you get into companies that are actually building new authentication platforms and things, right? Like, you get into very interesting aspects there of what that says to them. It gets interesting. Okay, it says leverage vetted modules such as identity management, encryption, auditing. Basically, don't write your own stupid encryption. Come on, y'all.
No.
And sorry if anybody you're writing your own encryption. I'm just kidding.
I mean, that just sounds, well, one, that's nerdy.
Okay.
But it sounds hard.
Using platform features in critical security functions will reduce developers' workload and minimize likelihood of design and implementation errors. That's straight up, right? Going and using something like Cognito or Azure Active Directory, Entra ID type extensibilities, things of that nature, or Azure Key Vault or things of that nature are going to be way better than you trying to do that yourself.
Standardize. I just can't. I mean, just using that word makes me feel better.
Yeah. For mechanisms such as identification, authentication, authorization, to make those mechanisms available to applications. Use only standardized, currently accepted, comma space, and extensively reviewed encryption algorithms. They really hit that hard, y'all.
Yes.
They're saying don't make your own encryption. I mean, unless you're like go and get it body standard approved and have people in the academia pick it apart and have threat actors or hackers go and tell you what's wrong with it.
It just sounds like a bad idea.
But why would you? There's so many accepted cryptographic types out there.
Again, Matt,
go work on those. Get in that work group. Yeah.
People get wrapped around the axle of like, but I can save money if I do it myself.
I doubt that. I think that's only hubris.
Maybe not this
I
one.
think that one's only hubris.
All right.
Okay. Operating systems provide mechanisms to create and maintain secure audit logs. What they're saying is that as you're doing these things, make sure that you're grabbing the logs and the information about that. They're basically just telling you that that stuff's there and you have it for logging, for encryption. Like, don't reinvent the wheel if you have OS logging you could rely on. Okay.
Right. 16.12.
16.12, implement code level security checks. This is where you get into SAST and DAST, right? Static application security testing, dynamic application security testing. Apply static and dynamic analysis tools, that's SAST and DAST, with the application lifecycle, within the application lifecycle. Like, as you build it, prior to release. Okay, let's.
Are you following the rules?
Are you following right? Verify that the secure coding practices are being followed. You're now checking. This is governance, boys and girls. I would be very surprised if 16.12 isn't some extensibility of governance. It is a tool, so it's probably not. But definitely, this is a governance check. This is saying, if my people have been trained by Jim at Manicode how to code securely, and we're doing those things and practices in the actual CI/CD lifecycle of that application, are we building in both static? Static means like looking at the code as it sits, right? Just to define. And as it's open, it's clear box, so it's not opaque. It is looking at code, whereas dynamic is actually interacting with the code as it's running, right? That's the big delineation. Static is code sitting on paper. Dynamic is as code it's running. So that means in multiple phases of your life cycle of your application, both from code to in development and actually live code, go check and interact with it, right? And there's tools out there, there's automations out there that'll do these things very well for you. They can be manual code reviews. Okay, I don't want to beat this to death. 16.13. Application pen testing, y'all. Right, Chris? Like code scan, do pen testing. What's the difference between a DAST and SAST versus a pen test? Why is this called out separately in your mind, Chris?
I hate going down this rabbit hole, but I think it's because it's two different places, right? For one, we're talking about, when you talk about application pen testing, there's a lot more rules oftentimes because of like where it sits. Like you can't just you're not going to just go pen test 365, right? Like there's some rules around what you can't do. So I think it gets into, in my humble opinion, is being able to have a scope for a pen test that lives within the boundaries of the application itself and is not just out there knocking.
You're not wrong about that. It is about that application and mainly not about attacking any of its PAS, FAS, or SAS type impedance or reliances. Maybe impedances.
I mean, you use a lot of tools this way too. That's different.
But no, this one's human. And the reason I wanted to call this out specifically is
fair.
SAST and DAST are going to be very tool oriented. What this calls out specifically is saying, for critical applications, authenticated pen testing, so application pen testing specifically, and then authenticated pen testing, meaning I already have a credential to the system,
right,
is better suited to finding business logic vulnerabilities. Those are those IDORs I talked about, than code scanning and automated security testing. Why? Because those are good at finding like root directories, finding things that have shares, injecting SQLIs or remote code execution capabilities, or remote lookups, or remote file
finding
inclusion,
what's exposed.
Kind of things. Right, but what this is saying, okay, I'm now a user. What can I do? And I'll give you a great example of what I lived with, right? We had a JSON web token that was intended to be able to do just billing and payments, right? So you could come in and pay your bill. But it then had the ability to go look at a quote. Well, what could I do with a quote that I could abuse? And you have to dig into and then change that application design to say, no, that's not what this is for. You didn't sign in regularly. This JWT isn't allowing you to go to that point. And so you have to look for those things by actually trying it and doing it. Those aren't going to be things a computer is the best at doing today.
Right.
Those are going to be things Matt's going to go, wonder if I can do this.
Right. The computer doesn't wonder.
It can identify those entry points, though. It can identify where those places probably are, likely are, where can I put that in, but it can't get smart like that, in my mind. So that's why application pen testing is humans. They want you to do it with an unauthenticated and authenticated user to find business logic vulnerabilities and other things that have been missed by a traditional code scanning capability. Okay.
And sometimes this is a volume game, right? How many times do I try that one thing and you don't get through, but then on the thousandth try,
like exhaustion capabilities, things like that. Those usually don't happen there. And what I mean by that is not I would say that probably happens more in SAST and DAST, only because you don't want to test against a developed application with a volume exhaustive type thing, because that gets very close to DDoS type capabilities, right? So typically pen testing avoid that. Not to be nitpicky in my very limited experience, but okay. So conduct threat modeling. All right, guys, this is the last one. Like, we're done. This is it. 16, 14, the holy grail for developers. We are done once we're done with this, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I tease. Okay, because we haven't talked anything about regression or any of the things that would need to happen in development. But this is a great start of all the things you need to do for security. Okay, conduct threat modeling. Threat modeling is the process of identifying and addressing application security design flaws. This goes back to that point of root cause that we talked about earlier. This is finding those fundamental flaws within a design before code is created. This is saying, what if I do this?
But this is funny because it's number 14.
Yeah.
Like it's the last one.
Because you got to get good at it first. You're not going to know
That's
what
true.
sucks until you get punched in the face.
That's right.
And I think that's the reality is this is a learning experience. And I think it's because most people have brownfield code and most of these things are speaking towards learn this, then have greenfield. I got into a little conversation with Unpopular Opinion, Copeland, about this, right? Saying, most people should start green. And everybody's like, no, that never happens. And the argument, it was a long one. But anyways, so threat modeling is the process of identifying and finding those flaws before it's created. We just said that. And it's conducted through specifically trained individuals who evaluate application design, gauge security risks for each entry point. Again, back to that entry point statement I made.
Right.
And access level to your POLP statement that you made earlier. The goal is to map out the application's architecture. Like if it never had more than this privilege, even if you got to this section at high privilege, it cannot go here. Right?
Yeah.
I'm over summarizing, but that's the statement of this, right? If you're thinking
that's
of
fair.
And then it says in a structured way to understand its weaknesses. What they're basically saying is, yeah, it's always going to have those weaknesses. It'll always be in a check and a balance. You always will have to balance productivity with security. That is the reality of it. But you can do some threat modeling to understand where your best choices are so that you're not left with maybe a front slash that allows you to reset up the setup wizard to let you get access to all those juicy machines in slash.
Man, it sounds very familiar. Like I've almost heard this.
It's almost
recently.
like that's real or something.
Real.
Okay. I think that's the natural conclusion of these.
I think we have wrapped up Control 16. I think for those of you that are listening to this, I think what we're really trying to get at is, as Matt did so eloquently decipher these safeguards, is to remember that you may not be building an application, but are you modifying one? You might not be building a program.
Like ask these questions too, right?
Like ask the questions. And I think, and I know this is a tough one. Like it's tough to get in that rhythm of wanting to, to get confident in asking some of these questions because they're not easy and the answers are potentially even more complicated than the question. So, but if you don't start doing it, you're never going to get good at it. And if you are participating in the Trust Mark, this is the place to go and ask.
And if you're a
in the
vendor,
Q&A.
go down this path. Like make sure you're doing these things. Look at it in its small piece. Go pull down my visualization, and I got to go because I do have back-to-backs. But go pull down my visualization and look at every yellow triangle and tell me if you're doing every yellow triangle in some form or fashion. Or yellow trapezoid, sorry.
Did you just give homework to the vendors that listen to this show?
That's weird. Can I do that? Is that allowed?
Sure, you absolutely.
Oh, thank you, brother.
We'll be grading homework whenever it gets turned in. For those of you listening, thanks and have a great week.